Well, welcome to our last learning community of the spring semester of 2025. We're thrilled that you were all able to join us today. Really excited about our speaker as well. She comes to us from the U of M and just has a wealth of information. Um, Something just to be mindful of before we start, please take care of your access needs as they come up. If there's something we can do to make this presentation more accessible to you, please do not be shy about sharing that. Um, we want to make sure that you are comfortable and well cared for during your time here with us. My name is Katie P. I work for the Technical Assistance Center at the University of Minnesota through ICI. And yeah, we're just thrilled to have you all here this evening. All right, we're going to start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge here that we are on the rightful homes of Dakotas and 7 other Indigenous nations and other Indigenous peoples. We recognize that the university and this Minnesota in itself did not hold up its end of the treaties, the land treaties, and it is because of the continued displacement of Indigenous people that the university and the state of Minnesota exists today. Our affirmation of commitment at ICI, we affirm our commitment to addressing systemic racism, ableism, and all other forms of inequities and oppression to ensure diverse and inclusive communities. Now the fun part. I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Jen Kunze. She is the director of Ramp Up to Readiness at the University of Minnesota here, and she's just going to share about what is Ramp Up to Readiness, how that impacts students, families, educators with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And she's awesome. I'm so glad we all get to hang out with her this evening. And thank you for being here tonight, Jen. I'm going to pass it back off to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Katie. I'm going to share my screen. Are we a go on the shared screen? Yep. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I've planned some learning targets for us tonight. I started my career as a high school social studies teacher, and I still do presentations thinking about what do I want the learner to take away at the end of my session. So for tonight, we will know what the College Readiness Consortium is, which is the home of Ramp Up to Readiness, what its aims are, and how it operationalizes its goals through 3 different main initiatives: the pre-college network, the community outreach that we do, and Ramp Up to Readiness, which takes the bulk of my time. We'll also have increased awareness of some current educational attainment data. I would have liked to loaded it up tonight, but it's often too much, especially at this time of the evening, but we'll do some of that. And then hopefully I can share some college readiness resources that may apply to your work, or at least the messaging implied in those. And I will be able to share those if you're interested. So first of all, let's talk about the College Readiness Consortium at the University of Minnesota. We'll talk about its aims and then how it operationalizes those aims. So several decades ago, Bob Bruniks was the president at the University of Minnesota. And during his tenure, General College was eliminated. General College was an entry point for students who maybe weren't quite ready for college at the University of Minnesota. Students could enter through General College, take some credits to get up to snuff, and then be part of the 4-year BA or BS program. When that was eliminated, it was because there was an article in the New York Times written about how top-heavy certain institutions in post-secondary were around the nation, and the university was one of them. And so to deal with that, the decision was made to get rid of General College, that access point for certain students. My dad was one of them. And interesting things happened. The population coming to the University of Minnesota got whiter and it got more affluent. And that was not the goal of eliminating General College, but it was the outcome. And so President Bruniks decided to do something about it. And he created the College Readiness Consortium, hired some people, found some funds to run it, and many good things have happened since then to make sure that a wide swath of people are available to come to the university. So my office is located in the Office of Undergraduate Education, and our aim is to engage with K-12 educators, youth workers, and all sorts of U of M programs to increase the number and diversity of students who graduate from high school, ready for success in all kinds of post-secondary. So you may think, well, we probably just want to replicate what we're doing and get more students to the university. Not necessarily. We are following the land-grant mission of many schools across the country, and that is to increase opportunity for students to be educated in all different areas, not necessarily at a four-year institution. So one thing to take note of right away is that we have a very broad definition of college, and it is what makes us unique. There are lots of college readiness programs out there across the country, but most of them define college as just 2- and 4-year programs. We followed labor trend data, and have decided that that's not right for what's depicted in that data, that college really should be, sure, those 2- and 4-year programs, but trade schools, apprenticeships, and certificate programs. And so that's what college is. And so that is why we feel strongly that students in schools and all students should be included when they use our Ramp Up to Readiness program, a college and career readiness curriculum for grades 6 through 12. If you're curious, you can go to this URL. I imagine we'll share the PowerPoint later to learn more about the College Readiness Consortium. So we do 3 main things to further the land-grant mission related to the Office of Undergraduate Education. The first is a pre-college network. And so this is a little bit off the specific task of tonight, but I like to say this so you know where we're framed in the university and what the university is valuing. So the Pre-College Network is a vast collection of leaders who provide youth programs across all 5 of the University of Minnesota campuses. So people who run camps, clubs, internships, those sorts of things are part of the network. So our youth programs are intended to inspire, engage, and expose youth to lifelong learning, and that is one of the greatest keys of my work. Is while we're talking about post-secondary in all different forms, if students take nothing else away, I want them to think about lifelong learning, because that is the main thing that generally keeps them employed and will be more important for the future. We expose them to college preparation and career readiness. Our programs include everything from agriculture, health, nutrition, music, sports, leadership, athletics. There's just tons of stuff for grades P through 12 for all types of learners. I don't run all these programs, but I do facilitate the college readiness part. So I bring these groups together, and so that when you come to a University of Minnesota camp program internship, you hear these messages infused in the program. And then we partner with another office on campus to make sure that we're following our safety of minors policy. So I thought it might be helpful just to show you what kinds of programs there are available to students in the state of Minnesota, and some from outside as well, that students can come to on our campuses just to learn about college. They often have a content area that they're supporting, or content areas or specific skills. But we want students to feel welcome from an early age, for their families to feel welcome, to learn about what happens on a college campus, so that someday they can be thinking about, well, what's a good fit for me, whether or not it's something like the university or not. So for example, on the left there, you'll see that we offer a Dakota Immersion Preschool. On the right, we've got things on the opposite end of the age spectrum, from post-secondary enrollment options from students all across the state. We have a food and agriculture camp, and that's coming up out of CFANS. It's fantastic. Students learn about growing food, about different nutritional things. On the right there, you'll see just one of our many STEM camps that we have on campus for different age groups. Here on the left, one of my favorite programs is our Northrop Student Matinee programs for grades 3 through 12, where students can come with their schools, and usually it's to see a dance performance, but don't think just something like ballet. We've got all sorts of things: jazz, new age, Students pay a very low price for a ticket. It's $3.50. And Northrop can often provide funds for busing. So schools that can go to that are really fantastically taken care of. On the right there, you'll see an example of our lab school on campus that's run. We have some that are part-day programs, full-day programs, and really fantastic learning. We offer, for other examples, a camp for kids who stutter, and it's part of a research project, but I don't know if the students would necessarily know that. On the right-hand side, we've got all sorts of opportunities for students for different ages to go to Rec Wellness, and these tend to be athletic types of camps, but don't think that they're training to be, you know, varsity athletes. It's for kids who want to learn about rock climbing, about shooting bows and arrows, about soccer, tennis, everything in between. On the left, I include an example of the Minnesota Writing Project. They have summer camps for students to learn how to write creatively in all different genres. It's not like writing college essays or anything like that. Really, really fantastic work. One of my favorite camps that we offer is on the right. It's from the Center for Transportation Studies, where students can learn for 2 weeks, and this is a free camp. They can learn about transportation systems, from highway systems, from urban planners, about how airports are run, about self-driving vehicles. It's a really great camp. One of our biggest camps is all the multiples of 4-H camps around the state that teach students social emotional skills, farming skills, animal husbandry, all sorts of things in there. On the right, I have an example about a girls' Eureka camp, which involves STEM. We have things like a high school band day, cheer and dance day. There are orchestra and band camps for students to come to. Really wonderful programs at the Minnesota Arboretum. So students are doing all sorts of things outside, learning about plants, growing plants, and all the wonderful species we have out there. For a very small part of the population, there's an opportunity to come to campus and be part of what they call Umpty Ump for really gifted math students. Not everyone would be eligible for that one. But for example, the Bell Museum, which is a science museum on campus, they run incredible camps for different grade levels, located on the St. Paul campus, but they also push out and do outreach across the state. And you may be thinking about these, well, are these camps for students with intellectual disability? And the answer is largely yes. I happened to meet with the Bell Museum today at a different conference and said, what do you guys do? And she said, yes, they can accommodate students with intellectual disability. The only thing they don't do is provide a PCA for the students at the camps, although students can bring their own if they have one. But yes, so with few examples, students with intellectual disability would be included. A second type of outreach we do is through community work. For example, this year we ran College Knowledge Month in October to help students learn about college. We had different activities every week where students could participate. They were mostly games, and they could win some prizes if they did, culminating in a FAFSA fill-out webinar involving some University of Minnesota staff who are experts in this area, as well as some local school counselors with expertise in college readiness, and particularly the FAFSA. And we do promotionals on the right there. If you can see, why is this FAFSA important for college? We push things out through social media, Facebook. We still do Twitter. Not sure we're going to do that for much longer, and we'll add Instagram, so that students are getting this information across the nation. We also started this year to do middle school visits for groups that want to come. And on the right there, you'll see one of our groups from Faribault, Minnesota, who came there in AVID class, although you could be any kind of middle school group. And again, the goal is just to help students learn about what happens on a college campus, We find that many students, if their parents have gone to college, have some familiarity with what happens on a college campus, but if they haven't come from that tradition, it can be a really mysterious place. And in this particular group, I asked the students how many of them had been to the University of Minnesota before, and only one student had. And so this was a great experience for them to see what classrooms look like, to see what hangout spots are at the University of Minnesota, go to the library and see where the loud parts are and the quiet parts of the library, just walk around and see students who look like them and so forth. So our third initiative, and this is the one that's mainly the topic for tonight, is Ramp Up to Readiness. So again, back when Bob Bernix was president and he wanted to make sure that students had information about college and careers, Ramp Up to Readiness was a curriculum that came out of that work. And Ramp Up is a grade 6 through 12 college and career readiness curriculum. You can see in orange the states where this program is used, not necessarily in the whole state, but in certain schools. It's also used in a couple of places in Asia. And our goal for Ramp Up is just to make sure students have an equitable opportunity to achieve social and economic mobility through higher education. And again, think of that broad definition when we're talking about post-secondary to be, yes, a 2-year and 4-year college, but it could be a trade school, an apprenticeship, a certificate program. And so that is the main part of our curriculum to help students learn those things. So again, we're not trying to get people to go to 4-year schools. We're not suggesting everyone should or could or even come to the University of Minnesota. Our theory of action, though, is that there are 5 specific areas of readiness that students should learn about long before they have to make a decision about what kind of post-secondary would be a fit for them. So starting in 6th grade and going all the way through 12th grade, usually done through like a 30-minute advisory once a week, students learn about academic readiness, which just involves, different content areas and knowing what are the academic skills that a certain setting would require. Learning about admissions readiness so that students know how to apply to different schools. How do you get a letter of recommendation? And where do you go to find out information about different kinds of schools? Where can you look this up, for example, on the college scorecard? Career readiness is the third part of our theory of action. We have found that many students are only familiar with the work that their parents do, maybe some neighbors, and they need a much broader exposure to what kinds of careers are out there. And so we teach students to use a variety of resources like the Bureau of Labor Statistics and other high quality sources to learn about what different careers are, what kind of preparation, is there a degree that you need to do a degree or certificate to do the program, and will those careers likely be available in roughly 10 years? Financial readiness is the next part of our theory of action that students need to learn, particularly those whose families do not have a tradition of going to college. How do you pay for college? Because we all know college has gotten a lot more expensive in the last 15 years or so. And so, for some students, if they hear, oh my goodness, the University of Minnesota is $36,000, how would anyone pay for that? We help students learn about the different ways to pay for college, whether it be a 529 plan where families can put away, $5 or $10 a month starting early, what federal financial aid is, and I, knock on wood, they'll be available, and that there are very wide arrays of financial costs associated with college, and that you do not have to go to the most expensive one to get a really fine education. And then the last part of our theory of action is social emotional readiness. And I think most people have a sense of what this is, but we try to reinforce stick-to-itness, employability skills, organization, and all those sorts of different things that students need to be successful in a post-secondary setting. So all of those areas of readiness are reinforced in different activities from grades 6 through 12 every single year. So they're building on those skills. We also use a post-secondary plan to help students just start to think about post-secondary, what are some places that sound interesting? What does it take to get in there? And those sorts of things. And there's a readiness rubric that students use in 2 different grades in middle and 2 different grades in high school to just see if they are on the path with the different areas of readiness to be able to be successful in post-secondary. So here's an example. We have a grade level scope and sequence for grades 6 through 12. There are about 30 lessons in each grade level. And the teachers who teach these are not experts in these areas. So our lessons read like a script. In some schools, it's SRO officer who leads Ramp Up, or a principal, or a media center specialist. It's not all school counselors who definitely are the experts in these areas. But one of the reasons we've done it this way is to distribute the learning across the system. So teachers across the system understand, and the adults in the school understand, that there are a variety kind of colleges, and you don't have to just go to a 2 or 4-year college to be successful. And so that messaging should come across the system, so all students are hearing that there is a setting that would be appropriate after high school. So I included an example lesson here for you to see, and then I'll walk you through the PowerPoint that accompanies this. So this particular lesson, if you look up here in the left-hand corner, is about finding the right post-secondary fit. This is in grade 11, and it's part of a unit just on the fit and what are those college choice factors to consider. All of our lessons are aligned with American School Counselor Association standards, and so you'll see them listed here. There are a lot of different standards, so different lessons have different standards, but they, involve effective oral, written communication skills, a positive attitude toward work and learning, and belief in yourself. We also include a learning target, so we're really crystal clear about what we're wanting students to learn in each lesson and the thinking level involved, because I care deeply about critical thinking and want students to do so if they're going to be embedded in the Ramp Up to Readiness program. We also have a list of resources that are needed. As I said, the teachers who teach these are not experts, so we include PowerPoints if necessary, different articles that can be accessed online. YouTube videos are heavily used in our research with schools using this. The students tend to like these very, very short YouTube videos that reinforce the learning targets in each lesson. And then, like other secondary lessons, you'll see that there's an opening, there's an activity, and there is a closure at the end. And I'll show you here about how the PowerPoint for this particular lesson looks. The learning target is that students will compare multiple factors to consider when selecting a post-secondary institution and rank them according to their own personal priorities. So again, no push to say that we do not try to align students with colleges. We expect that students, along with their parents and their counselor, will do that work together. So in a previous lesson, students had been learning about important aspects of finding the right post-secondary fit, including focusing on college majors and considering technical 2- and 4-year options. They've also learned about apprenticeships and certificates. We find that when students tell us what they know about college, one thing they do know typically is that the longer people go to school, the more money that they make. And that actually does bear out in research on labor for many, many decades in the United States. So this is updated every year, and this is the latest one from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, showing that for people who have earned less than a high school diploma, median usual weekly earnings are about $708. And this is the median for the country, this line here. And, the difference between that and earning a doctoral degree is over 100,000 for that. And again, we are not suggesting that everyone needs to do that at all, just to help students understand. What students generally don't understand is the flip of this is that there's an inverse relationship between the longer you go to school and the likeliness of being unemployed. And so this is usually something new. And I know looking at the Think College website recently in preparation for this, that students with intellectual disabilities who have certificates and have earned some sort of diploma are more likely to keep their jobs even in difficult economic times. We also help students understand that there are other reasons to pursue whatever kind of learning you can after high school, that there's actually some correlation with life expectancy in this country. Another study that I didn't include in tonight shows that people who have earned a 4-year degree versus those who haven't in this country right now are living 8.5 years longer. And that is not to suggest that people who don't will not live that long, but those who have a job and maybe are carrying some insurance who are likely to see a physician on an annual basis are likely to live longer. So there's some real correlations that we want students to know about. In this lesson, we're just told students that we'll compare multiple factors to consider when selecting a post-secondary institution. So we want students to know that there are many, many, many factors, and it shouldn't just be on the name or the reputation of certain schools, the locations, or where everyone else says they're going on social media. We have them read an article or have the class read an article together in this particular lesson about choosing the right fit from Peterson's. And then we have the students reflecting on what were the factors listed in the article and what matters to you most. Everyone's going to feel differently about this and why. And then which of the factors matter least to you. And then we had the students do a brainstorm about what are some other factors that they might want to consider when choosing a post-secondary institution that are not included in that article and why those might matter to you. And it could be something like, well, my grandma lives 30 minutes from there and I'd like to be close to family. Well, that's not in the article, but that is a valid point when students are thinking about where do they want to go after high school. So regardless of whether or not you're looking at a training program or a 4-year institution, everything in between, we urge students to think about location. Is there a possibility of commuting from home? Are there family and friends or other supportive people nearby who can help you in college when things are getting difficult? And typically they do for just about all students. Are they near public transportation? Should they need to ride that? And then for students who need to work while they're going to school, are there potential employers nearby? Other factors we encourage students to think about are the demographics. For example, the diversity of students. And then what are the learning and living environments like at different schools? There are residential options on and off campus. In certain schools, those with intellectual disability would live with other students that do not have an intellectual disability, and that might be an advantage, but we want students to check those things out and make sure, since that's still sort of rare today. Are there social, athletic, and cultural clubs on campus that would make students feel at home? I'll give you a quick example. In part of my work, I work with some undergrads. They volunteer to work with me on some of our middle school tours. And one of my students this year, who's a sophomore, lived at home to save money. She has an on-campus job and she works as a barista at a Target, at a coffee shop in a Target. And her first year did not go very well. And the reason she said was that when she intended to go to her school, 2 friends were also going to go there and they backed out at the last minute. So she didn't know anyone at the University of Minnesota. Her grades were not great. She felt disconnected because she didn't live on campus. And she said it was a really, really rough year. And at the end of that year, she got a job working at one of the cultural clubs in campus in Appleby Hall. And she found her people and she took advantage of some tutoring options on campus And for her, it made all the difference in the world. She found her people and she found her home. And she said without that, she would have floundered. So we want students to know that you can look for those sorts of things and find out where you fit in, and that will make all the difference in the world. And then in addition, are there on and off campus professional organizations or activities that students would like to be a part of? Are there connections to different, to employers who come in looking for employees? Is the campus a green campus for students? For some students, that may matter to them. And then is there available technology, whether it's assistive or other types of technology to support the learning? And also, students can consider whether or not there's a religious presence and if they want that or don't want that. There are schools of all sorts of different kinds. Are there political leanings that are supportive to the student or the reverse? And are there volunteer and community outreach opportunities? In addition, are there job placement services that will help students get that job after they finish? Are there possibilities for internships while learning? And if so, are they paid internships or not? And then are there online learning options for students who would like to do that? And then, of course, other things to consider include academics. And two different considerations, for example, does most colleges have an academic success center that will help students if they need mentoring or tutoring or getting them connected to a professional organization or a club that enhances their learning. And there are lots of these. Interestingly, though, I did last week I was on vacation with my family and my son did a college visit to a University of California school. I won't name which one. And learned that if you want to go to that particular school and you need tutoring services, you have to pay extra. Where at the University of Minnesota, that's just part of your tuition. And that's one reason our grad rates have increased a lot, because we are very supportive of our students. And then, for example, I just pulled an example from Georgia Tech about tutoring and academic support there. Are there opportunities to participate in research? Many students are looking for that right now. Others have no interest in that, and that's fine. And I gave a couple examples of, I mentioned tutoring. Is there tech support for students who need it? Are there writing centers? Are there research centers? And in terms of other academic factors, are there student accessibility services? I pulled a couple of things here. We won't look at them now, but if you were to look at this later, you'd see the videos at the City University of New York and Clemson University, and you can see what is offered for students there. And then after meeting with Katie and Mary this week, we talked about how there are specific programs out there for students with intellectual disability, and I understand that there are not enough of them, but I also know that those programs are growing. And so this was just updated in March and indicated that after this last update, there were 333 programs across the country, and now there are 360. So from year to year, that grew. If you're interested in this chart and the report that goes with it, I included the URL. I also know from talking with Mary and Katie that probably not all of those 360 programs meet the standards with which we'd want to see. So I'm not suggesting that there are 360 top-notch programs for students with intellectual disability. Just that the numbers are growing and they are available across the country. So other academic factors that in this particular lesson students would learn about is what kind of choices do students have in terms of class? Are they all structured, or would they have a lot of different options for the sequence in which they would learn? Another thing to think about is there a lot of competitiveness among students, or is it a more supportive environment? And then we'd want students to learn about the different financial factors. As I mentioned, there's such an array from fairly reasonably cost tuition to through the roof, over $100,000 and everything in between. So we help students learn about what's a financial aid package, what are loans versus grants and scholarships, what do those look like, and you can look those up in a number of different places. And to think about, it's not just the tuition and the housing that students should consider, but there are also travel costs if they choose to go away from home and want to go home during the school year. And again, are there opportunities to work on campus, whether it be work study or other kinds of jobs that can offset the high costs of college? So once students have some understanding of all those things, then we ask them to prioritize their college choice factors. Which of those matters the most? And it's usually all over the board. And then we ask them to do some dialogue. Our program is heavy on dialogue because we do a lot of reading together or watching videos together. We want kids to process this information and not just take it. They should question it and find data in our lessons to support that. And so then we just have some conclusion here that students should consider the many factors when choosing a college. A school counselor or a family member can help them sort through the options. And if they're in the ramp-up program over the many years, they will also be able to sort through these options. And then a message we give often is there is no one best college. No matter what other people say, there are likely multiple colleges that would be a good fit, even if it's difficult to get into them. So students should keep their options very, very much open. And finding that right post-secondary fit can help students reach their college and career goals. And if they want more information, we have tons of resources, and here's just one that we shared from the College Board Big Future. So next I'll transition into what does the current educational attainment data say? And I pulled this from the Lumina Foundation, which has been tracking the educational attainment rate across our country since 2009. And there has been a goal set to reach 60% of the population by 2025. We did not meet that goal. And so actually this spring, Lumina is setting some additional goals and looking at this differently, but this is the most recent report that we can get. There are many, many, many different interesting parts of this report, so I pulled some for you. So the good news here is that since Lumina has been tracking educational attainment as a whole, we are doing better across the nation. And so you can see from 2009 to the most recent report, we have been doing better. One difference in the data is that certificates and some industry recognized certifications were added to the definition of Lumina at certain points. So that probably accounts for the bumps you see here. But from end to end, we're doing better. On the right-hand side here, you can see the distribution of that attainment for ages 25 to 64. That's generally the range that labor economists consider the working population. So you can see that 14.1% of the population had earned a graduate or a professional degree, 23.2 had a BA, 9.3 an associate's degree, 4.2 a certificate, 3.6 some certification, and 11.1 was some college but no credential, and 24.9% a high school graduate, including GEDs, and 5.6% of the population went to high school but no diploma, and that 4.2 had less than a 9th grade education. So that's where we stand. Lumina tracks this year to year, so I'm anxious to see how this looks in the coming year. So let's talk about how you might share these messages with the groups you're associated with in your communities. One of the main messages should just be that educational attainment matters a lot today, and it's going to continue to matter more and more over time as our economy shifts. And I understand there's a lot of shifting going on in the economy right now, but I don't know that we'll ever go back to having so much manufacturing work in our country that we used to have, say, like in the 1980s. The Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce is one of my main sources that I really love to find follow labor trends. And this fall, they put out this report that by 2031, 72% of jobs in the US will require some kind of post-secondary education and or training. So I want students to know this, that in the past, it was much more likely that students could graduate from high school and perhaps follow their parents by working in their shop or in the same factory where a parent did. Those options are becoming slimmer. And so I don't want to scare students and their families, but just know that those are, those options will exist. There are fewer of them. The economy of the future will involve learning and retraining and learning and retraining. So most of us will have multiple jobs over the course of our career. I also would encourage you to share with the students in your life or in your professional work that there are basically 3 different areas why it's really important to have some kind of post-secondary credential. And these 3 areas are highlighted in the Ramp Up to Readiness curriculum. And there's a lot of depth in this, so I won't even touch on it tonight. But the first is the economic benefits. I talked about that a little bit. The health benefits that I touched on, and then societal benefits. When people have more education, they tend to have health insurance, so there are better life outcomes. They can contribute to a larger tax base, so we have more money for schools and roads and libraries and all the things that are important in a democracy. They tend to vote more often, etc. So it isn't just you make more money if you go on to some kind of learning after high school. It's a lot of different things that combine, and the data is strongly supportive of that. Another resource that I wanted to share with you, I think, is something I found to be really important in my work with middle schoolers when they come to campus to learn about what's happening at the University of Minnesota. And again, these middle schoolers are coming, they may have a foundation in college, they may not, they may have interest in college at that point, they may have not. But we just start with a general discussion. It's following a KWL model, but what do you know about college? And that's the K. And I have students just literally brainstorm, sometimes on paper, sometimes out loud. What do you know about college? And it can be anything from my aunt went to college and she liked it, or there are football games on some college campuses, or there are community colleges, or college is expensive, and everything in between. Then I asked them, what do you want to know about college? And then, do a brainstorm similarly. So I know, like, what is it that interests them? And how can I tailor my messages to help them understand what they want to know about college? And then finally, after we do our discussion and do a tour around campus, different than the kind of admissions tour, as I mentioned, I take them to a library, to the student union, down a place called Scholars Walk. We go to the Rec and Wellness Center. We go to something called One Stop, so students can learn, like, how do you register for college? How do you learn about what your tuition is? And just point out the various things on a college campus and have them look at the students around them to see if they could see themselves there. Then we come back and just do a brainstorm about what did you learn about college, and think, how does that compare to what they knew? And I'm telling you, from beginning to end, they can learn a lot in just a 2-hour session. Another resource that might be helpful for you, I have this 1-page document that we have produced from the College Readiness Consortium and Ramp Up to Readiness. This helps families just learn some basic tips about how they can help their students become ready for any kind of post-secondary in those 5 different areas of readiness that I mentioned that are included in our theory of action. And so, for example, for some families, especially those who perhaps don't have a history of college in their family, we want them to know that reading from day 1 or even in utero is a really, really important lifelong skill, and will help students become learners that way. And we even specify at least 20 minutes a day, and that when they can, to help their child get a free library card. So things like that. So basic things from talking to your students about a wide array of careers, pointing out different careers when you see them in the community, helping your child think about how do you budget for college and how do you figure out how much it costs to pay for food when you're in college, or talking to other people, including teachers at school or the counselors or special ed case managers. Have them talk to your children about what college was for them and why they made the choices that they do. So this is a one-page document. If you're interested in this, I can push it out to you through, it's in a PDF form, and you can share it with any of your constituents who could find this information helpful. The College Readiness Consortium has produced this document, which is kind of a longer version of what I just showed you. And it lays out important things that families can do from birth to high school to help their students be ready for college. This is a college planning timeline that comes from Think College that I've included in our curriculum this year. Really important information for every year in high school, junior year, senior year. And I will say I love this document, but I do want to make sure that families know that these discussions need to start much earlier than junior and senior year in high school. And in addition, if you're interested in learning about what are the really concrete steps that a college search might involve, we have a blog that can be accessed through this. And one resource I recommend for students and their families to use is the College Scorecard. Again, knock on wood that with the changes in the federal government that this stays in place. This is a great tool for students to learn all sorts of different aspects about colleges. And if you're interested in any of those resources, I'd be happy to share them with you. That is where my part of the presentation ends, and so I will stop sharing and turn it back to Katie and Mary.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. Are there any questions right now about anything that was shared? Mary and I will share out some specific college information from Think College. We'll send those resources out to everyone who attended and post it on our website. But just a wealth of information there on things we can be doing to get ready for college, thinking about early. So thank you. That was great.
You're welcome.
We do have a quick poll here. If people would just take the time to fill that out, we'd appreciate it. Other than that, that's all we have planned for this evening. So if you'd like to stay on and chat a little bit, we'd love to connect with you. Thank you all for attending.